In this topic, we will study about conflicts. What are conflicts? How do conflicts originate? What are the sources of conflict? What are the different types of conflict? And then how to manage conflicts? What are the different managing styles? Which is very important. If you study conflicts, how do they originate? The obvious thing is you should also know how to manage them or how to handle conflicts. So, what are the various styles which managers need to adopt to manage the conflicts? So let us go ahead and start with what understanding about conflicts. According to you, is a conflict? Conflict is essentially incongruence of ideas. What does incongruence mean? Unequal. Unequal word is equal is a word which is used in algebra in mathematics. Congruence is a word which is used in geometry. So here we mention it is incongruence. Incongruence is not equal. So if your idea is different from my idea, your thoughts are different from my thoughts, both our thoughts are not aligned, both our objectives are not aligned, both our goals are not aligned, there is some incongruence. Hence it may lead to a conflict. So incongruence of ideas in a layman term could be called as a conflict or a disagreement. Disagreement between two thoughts, disagreement between ideologies could also be termed as conflict. Now conflict can take up two forms, as we can see here. It could be a violent form, it could be a subtle form. Now violent is something which is more expressive. So this comes out in the open, it is manifested in the open. So both you and I or everybody else can see it. It becomes so open, so obvious, it comes under the visibility of everybody. Whereas that the other form of conflict could be in a very subtle manner, which is not seen, which is more like a latent conflict or hidden conflict, which you can only feel it and know that this person is actually going through a conflicting stage or a conflicting form. So let us now go ahead and understand a little more about conflicts, and let us try to put it in a form of a definition. So Kolb and Bartnick have worked on it, and according to them, disagreement or presence of tension or some other difficulty between two parties can be termed as conflict. So they termed disagreement between two parties. They took up two parties. Two parties could be individuals, two parties could be two groups, could be a group and the other party could be an individual. So there could be any case. So here he says, or rather they say, that disagreement or presence of tension or some other difficulty between the two parties, two or more parties. You can have more parties also. For simplicity's sake, let us understand if there are two parties and if they are sitting across each other to sort out an issue. The very fact that there is some issue itself conveys that there is some kind of conflict, there is some kind of disagreement, there is some kind of tension between them. And struggle between incompatible or opposing needs, opposing wishes or interests or ideas of people can also be termed as conflict. So there are incompatible issues, incompatible needs. The needs are opposing, their needs are not aligned, they are in a direction which are in opposite directions. Ideas or interests or people, they are just opposing, they are not in the same direction, lead to a form of a conflict. In fact, could indicate that there is a conflict. So conflict occurs when both parties cannot achieve their respective goals or respective objectives. Competition is also a form of conflict. In fact, competition in an organization is very much encouraged, provided it is healthy. So managers need to handle this kind of and encourage the spirit of competition and handle it in a very sensitive manner, lest it takes a violent shape and disrupts the objectives for which it has been meant for. So competition is also a kind of conflict, and no direct action to interfere with the activities of others. So in a competition, when two different departments or two different individuals in the same section or in different sections are competing to achieve their goals, as to who achieves their goals the best and who is able to achieve it quickly and 100% of the goals, the complete goals. Some are able to do it in a time frame, but they are able to do only about 70% of the goals. There is another individual who works and then is able to achieve about 90-95% of the goals, which both of them have agreed within the set time frame, obviously. So there is no direct action or no deliberate action rather to interfere with the activity. Just like track events, when there is a race or a marathon, then there are several tracks and runners are assigned different routes or different tracks. So nobody will cut across and go to another track, but yet they will try to compete with each other and try to reach the finish line much earlier than the others. So it's a kind of a competition. So competition can also be termed as or looked at as a conflict, where no other person or no individual is trying to cross the line or enter into the other's track, rather interfere into the other's track. So no deliberate attempt or action to interfere with the activities of others, like a track event, could be an example of a conflict, and could also be looked at as a competition in an organization, which is very healthy and encouraging, because every department should be working in a competitive mode. If there is a competitive spirit in the organization, please note the word spirit is very important. There has to be a competitive spirit. In the wake of competing and racing against others, people may try to harm others. People may try to talk ill about others and try to damage somebody's other individual's reputation. They may try to do half the work in the wake of doing it completely and finishing it much earlier than the other. They may try to do incomplete work. They may try to do shoddy work or shabby work. So it has to be handled very carefully. So it's like a school or a college or a classroom where teacher starts in a for a test, for preparing for a test, or in a test she tries to create a kind of competitive spirit where each individual tries to solve the problems quickly and faster and correctly, of course, and who does it better. So the competition spirit is encouraged. So the same thing is brought from a small level to an organizational level where competition is encouraged, and it is also a kind of conflict, but needs to be handled very sensitively. Let's also look at frustration, which is yet another dimension, which in fact is a negative dimension as compared to competition. Whenever there is a need will arise when there is a deficiency. If there is something lacking, only then a need will arise. For example, if I have a deficiency of iron, so there is a need for me to compensate and eat something which contains enormous iron so that I fulfill that deficiency. So the deficiency remains no more, and therefore whenever there is a deficiency, it leads to the development of a need. A need arises because of a deficiency, and this deficiency then needs to be given a direction. So there has to be a drive, some kind of a drive or a direction basically, to fulfill that deficiency, so that you are able to fulfill the deficiency and reach the goal. So a need arises, so there is a deficiency which gives rise to the development of a need. The need is then given a direction, which is actually called a drive. So you are driven towards it, you go in that direction, move in that direction, and ultimately you fulfill that deficiency. That deficiency is fulfilled, so the goal is achieved. However, in the process of when you are being driven towards the goal, there may be a barrier, which could be covert, which could be overt, in the sense which could be hidden or which could be out in the open and visible to everybody. So either it could be covert or overt. Okay, something which is visible or overt, something which is not visible or hidden, which you just need to interpret and understand and comprehend, perhaps, or latent barriers which are not seen, which are not visible, covert barriers, which act as a speed breaker between the drive and the goal, and therefore it can lead to another emotion called frustration. So which is all this frustration can also be termed as a different type of a conflict. Moment there is a frustration, we can see different kinds of behaviors. One, defense mechanism. So when there is a frustration, person moves into a defensive mode and starts, his defense mechanism gets invoked. Or there could be aggression, that he becomes too aggressive when he gets frustrated. Aggression could be a behavior which an individual may exhibit. Or there is a withdrawal system, that means he retraces his steps, he goes into the submissive mode. He is actually submitting, and rather more than submitting, he is retracing his steps and doesn't want to enter, so he is withdrawing. Withdrawal symptoms are seen. So that could be a behavior. Or there could be a compromising behavior where he enters into a compromise with the situation. So he will compromise with the situation and accept as to whatever the situation gives him, or whatever the situation provides. He would not try to change. He will not become aggressive. He will more enter into a compromising situation. So frustration also is a kind of conflict, as competition is. Competition is a healthy one. Frustration is of course an undesirable emotion or undesirable conflict, which could be overt, which could be covert, and which could basically be due to an overt barrier or a covert barrier, that is a visible barrier or a hidden barrier, and may lead to frustration. Once there is frustration, as we see here, there could be 3 or 4 different kinds of behaviors which an individual or a group may exhibit. Defense mechanism is one, in the sense a person becomes defensive. He doesn't want to attack. He is no more in the attacking mode, and therefore more on the defensive front. He goes into the defensive side. There could be an aggression. He becomes too aggressive and too violent and too vocal about it. So this kind of aggressive behavior we can see. Aggression could be in the form of verbal or written skills. He is writing too harsh letters and he is emotionally disturbed, so that could be an aggression. Or he retraces his steps back and he goes into the withdrawal. He or she shows a withdrawal symptom. Just opposite of aggression, you can say that there is a compromise. He doesn't want to be very aggressive, rather he is in a more understanding mode and wants to enter into a compromise to resolve a conflict. You can put it in that way, which we, of course, we will see it in subsequent slides as we progress in the course.